The last thing you want to happen as a conditional resident is for USCIS to terminate your conditional residence after they deny an I-751. An I-751 is a petition to remove the conditions on residency. So if you got your green card through marriage and it's a 2-year green card, which means it expires in 2 years, you generally need to remove the conditions on residency before those 2 years expire by filing Form I-751. And the purpose of the I-751 is to just prove that you're still in a good faith marriage with your spouse. But I've had a lot of situations where, people are in a good faith marriage and things begin not working out. And, they're kind of rocky at the time that the immigrant spouse gets the green card, but the marriage is still hanging on. And then sometime shortly thereafter, the marriage just falls apart and they're separated, or they're talking about divorce, or not talking at all, which is probably worse. In those scenarios, what should you do? I would say once every week or two, I speak to somebody who is in this exact scenario. So I thought I would make another video on this topic to help someone out who might be experiencing this right now. And by the way, if you're overwhelmed and you just don't know what to do, you could always schedule a consultation directly with me and we'll go through it and create a plan so that I could best assist you and so that you could keep your green card. There are 2 scenarios I find my average client in whose marriage has fallen apart. One is they are actively getting divorced. So there's a divorce petition pending. And the other one is they're just separated and gonna kind of try to work it out enough to submit the I-751, even though the marriage is no longer really hanging on. They're pretty much like guaranteed to get divorced. They're just separated right now, possibly even seeing other people. And the marriage is just over. They're just trying to file the I-751. The immigrant spouse might be agreeing with the US citizen spouse to just like, okay, look, we'll be separated, but can you please co-sign the I-751 with me so that I could keep my green card? Let me start by saying that's a mistake. If you're separated and you know for sure that the marriage stands no chance, I recommend getting divorced as soon as possible, because when you're separated, you're not really accumulating more evidence of your life together. You're not going on trips together. You're not spending holidays together. You're not getting Christmas cards. And sure, you can fabricate these things, but that's a really bad idea for immigration purposes. So it's really unnecessary as well. When it's time to file the I-751, what I tell people is you either want to be fully married in good faith or fully divorced. You don't want to be in limbo. You can also file the I-751 if you have a divorce petition pending, but if you're just separated and trying to submit weak evidence that you're still together, that's probably the worst situation to be in. And that's what I always like to avoid when I speak to people who are considering just remaining separated and filing it jointly. I don't recommend doing that at all. I would way rather see you just get divorced and then submit as much evidence as possible to show that your marriage was entered into in good faith. When you file the I-751, there's 3 categories that I generally use that allow you to file the I-751. The first one is you're still fully married, and in that case, you would be filing the I-751 jointly with your spouse. When you file it jointly with your spouse, there is a chance that you and your spouse can be interviewed in the future. It's less likely if you submitted a ton of evidence from the past 2 years showing that you guys are still in a good faith marriage, but it's possible, and those policies change all the time. If you are divorced, at that point, you don't need your spouse to file the I-751. You would just file a copy of the divorce certificate, and on the I-751, you would select the option indicating you entered the marriage in good faith, but it ended through divorce or annulment. And in that situation, you don't need your spouse to sign it. It's just the immigrant spouse who signs the I-751. You include a copy of your final divorce certificate or a date-stamped copy of the divorce petition showing it's pending. And most importantly, you need to still submit a ton of evidence showing the marriage was entered into in good faith, even if you guys haven't been living together for a few months or even the past year. You need to prove that when you entered into the marriage, it was in good faith. I'm going to talk more about this in 1 second. And the third option, if neither of these two are really possible, is you can file the I-751 by proving that your removal from the US would cause extreme hardship. And that's pretty vague. I've done a few of those, and with mixed results. It depends on what the personal situation of the person is, what country they're from, how bad conditions are there, if the person has any health or mental health problems that could exacerbate those conditions and cause them extreme hardship. But the purpose of this video is to really talk about people who are separated or divorced. So if you file the I-751 with proof that your divorce petition is pending, usually USCIS will accept that, and then like 6 to 9 months later, they will mail you a request for evidence asking for proof of the final divorce certificate, divorce decree, divorce order, whatever it's called in your jurisdiction. And then you send a photocopy of it over. Then eventually, and this could take like 3 to 4 years, they will interview you, just you, not your US citizen spouse. And the purpose of the interview is to make sure that your marriage was entered into in good faith. About a month and a half ago, I attended one of these interviews for a case that had been pending for like 3.5 years. And the interview was just like 5 minutes because we had submitted stacks of evidence showing that the marriage was entered into in good faith and that the US citizen spouse was just like kind of crazy and impossible to live with and impossible to have a marriage with. And the officer like pretty much said, I'm gonna approve this. I don't really need to ask you that many questions. You submitted enough evidence for me to know that this marriage was entered into in good faith. He asked like 5 or 10 questions just to develop the record, and then sent us on our way and encouraged us to apply for naturalization as soon as possible if that was something that we were interested in, which we were. Here's the problem with trying to act like you're still in a good faith marriage when you guys are separated and not even living together. In addition to it arguably being immigration fraud, which I'm not even going to discuss that, the main problem is you're not going to have a ton of evidence that you're in a good faith marriage, and that increases the probability of you both being requested to come in for an interview. And that interview could be years down the road. And if your US citizen spouse refuses at that point, or at that point, if you say, you know what, we're just gonna get divorced, it looks pretty shady that you acted like you were in a good faith marriage for like the final year before you were supposed to file the I-751, but you have literally zero evidence from that final year other than some like weak bank statements, utility bills, a lease agreement, and like maybe one photograph of you guys during that time period. In reality, the marriage had fallen apart a year before that. And when you go to the interview several years later and you explain, you know what, actually now we're getting divorced, it's gonna look really suspicious, and I definitely don't recommend doing that. As soon as you know the marriage is definitely not gonna work out, I'm not saying don't get separated and try to work it out, but as soon as you know it's definitely not gonna work out, at that point you really need to protect yourself as the immigrant spouse who's gonna need to file the I-751, and you need to think about making that I-751 petition as strong as possible. If you are going through this exact situation yourself and you don't wanna do it by yourself, or you're scared, or you wanna talk to a lawyer, you can consult directly with me. I handle these cases all the time. We'll talk about how to make your case as strong as possible to improve the probability of success so that you can keep your permanent residence, and then down the road, if you want, apply for US citizenship. If you want to talk with me, you can find my information in the video description below, or you can go to my website to schedule a consultation. If you're interested in learning more about these specific topics, family-based immigration, naturalization, and changes to immigration policy under the Trump administration, be sure to subscribe to my channel. I put out several videos each week, and I'll see you guys next time for another video.